Okay, hello. So, another Raw Therapee video, and today I'm gonna go through the details tab here. You see, so here are the tabs at the top: the exposure tab, details tab, colors tab, etc., etc. I'm gonna go through one tab at a time. And last time I did the exposure tab, and I forgot to mention a whole aspect of the curves here, which is that you can pick different methods for controlling the points on the curve, and I use standard, which is why I forgot to mention it. But you can select flexible, where you should be able to move points on the curve without affecting others. You can make straight lines, right? Now, obviously I don't use it, so I'm not able to demonstrate it in a very meaningful way, but you get the point. You have more freedom, and you might enjoy using flexible. And there's parametric, where you can use sliders, and you can't drag the curve, but you can drag these jobbies here, right? So there's parametric, and that's kind of a, if you're used to using the levels tool on your pictures, maybe this would be intuitive to you. And then there's control cage, which I don't quite get this. Like, you can go to Rawpedia, and I mean, I do not doubt that it's very powerful and cool. But I mean, I'm happy myself with the standard curves. I've been using them for ages, and I find I'm able. But I've got two of them now, and I find that, you know, I have plenty of control of the curves in this without having to use these other methods. But anyway, that's why I forgot to mention them. I usually don't, well, I don't bother to use them. But just so you know, there is more to the curves than what I explained in the last video. There's also these different methods for controlling the different control points on the curve. And, you know, if you want to get more involved in that, by all means, go read about them. I'm not the one to teach you that because I don't use it. And here in the details tab, you know, I don't always use everything in this either, but I will do my best just to give you kind of a quick start guide, right? So you've got sharpening here, you've got local contrast, edges, micro contrast, impulse noise reduction, defringe, contrast by detail levels, and haze removal. Oh, and also, since my last video, Raw Therapee 5.8 has come out, and I'm here in 5.8. I'm running a different version. They call the local lab version, that has some local adjustments here. That is not the official version, but like, other than this tab, for all intents and purposes, it works like Raw Therapee 5.8. So I'm using this, is what I'm using. And okay. So the big new feature in 5.8 is capture sharpening, and I've been using this for a while because I use this unstable build. We've had the capture sharpening for a while, and I've mentioned it in a previous video, and it is not here in the details tab, but I'm kind of gonna have to mention it today anyway, because in 5.8, and I would assume, you know, going forward, there is capture sharpening, and if you're opening raw pictures, it is going to be applied automatically to your pictures. So when you open them, like, the capture sharpening is on, and if you go over to the raw tab and go to the bottom, there it is, capture sharpening, and we could turn it off. And in a lot of pictures, it makes quite a big difference. This one is not a huge difference, but you know, the more your picture can be in focus and yet there's still a certain amount of blur in it. And some of that is from the filter over your camera's sensor, the anti-aliasing filter if your camera has one. And some of it can come from the lens and stuff. And this does a good job of sharpening that out, and that is what you want, on the input of your raw file, into a program like this. This is the first step that you want done, and it's new. Before, there was just this sharpening here. Now, the capture sharpening is so good that you almost don't need this sharpening anymore for raw pictures. Capture sharpening only works with raw pictures. But you can still use this sharpening to do, like, output sharpening, which you could also do over here with the post resize sharpening tool. But if you're outputting at the native size, you can use this to do your output sharpening, or like maybe you want to do some creative sharpening. And there's other tools in this that sharpen too. So that's what this tab is all about: sharpening and noise reduction. So I suppose we'll click sharpening on. I find the default settings usually looks pretty good. It's a little bit overdone here, but that might be because we've already got capture sharpening on. There's two methods for sharpening here. There's Unsharp Mask and RL deconvolution. And RL deconvolution, whoa, it's a much stronger effect at the default. This one is really meant to mitigate the effects of a Gaussian blur. So in some cases that will be just right for the blur in your picture, but not necessarily, right? Because the blur in your picture is not necessarily a Gaussian blur. But in some pictures it works really well. And if you're using the RL deconvolution, you're going to have to play with the radius, and there'll be, depending on the picture, you kind of have to trial and error it to find the right radius for the picture. With the sharpening, you can click on this sharpening contrast mask. Now, where we've got capture sharpening on, okay, yeah. So we're getting the sharpening contrast mask, and the areas that we see as dark will not be sharpened, and the areas that are light will. And you can adjust it as needed. And with this RL deconvolution, you figure out your radius, and then you can adjust the amount. And you can do some damping to it. And they have iterations too, because this has to be done again and again. That's the way it works. So you can adjust the iterations. I've left it at the default the times I use it. And honestly, since the capture sharpening came out, I'm using this RL deconvolution pretty rarely. And back to the Unsharp Mask, this is more like what you're probably used to if you are, using Adobe Lightroom or something like that. So again here, you have a contrast threshold. Oh, whoops, that's focus. You have a contrast threshold that you can adjust. And the blur radius, you see, I don't usually touch this, and I opened up Rawpedia just so I'd have it on hand, and I can get a quick definition. We're not talking about the blur radius here, though. Anyway, I don't touch it. And with Unsharp Mask, you adjust your radius, and since the capture sharpening has come out, they say to use a radius probably between 4 and 6. 0.4 and 0.6. And that's what I've been doing. That's, you know, usually what I do anyway. Unless the picture is a higher ISO, I might use more higher radius. And I don't want the sharpening effect to be very strong. Here, you know, like the capture sharpening has made my picture pretty sharp. So I don't need it to be sharpened a lot. And they've got this thing, well, let me turn it up. Radius controls the thickness of your sharpening, so if it's too much, you'll get halos, right? And here they've got this thing called halo control, and that will reduce the amount of halos, and there's an amount for halo control. Now, having two methods and all these controls, the sharpening in Raw Therapee is, I think, more powerful than what you get in Adobe Lightroom. You know, Photoshop is very deep, and you can obviously do a lot in it, but Lightroom is pretty basic in its sharpening. So I think this is more powerful, and the real cool thing is this threshold slider. So, like, check this out, right? So you can move just by dragging and clicking on these points, and this is basically like a curve for the sharpening threshold. And so, like, the vertical axis here is how strong your sharpening is. And if you hold shift, I guess, you can move individual points. And without shift, it moves the whole end of the curve. And what this does is to take sharpening, so it will take sharpening out of your shadows or out of your highlights. And so, I mean, it's really useful, especially for a high ISO picture with noisy shadows, or, you know, a picture where your highlights maybe are mostly out of focus specular highlights and you don't want them sharpened. You can drag this down until the sharpening is not sharpening the highlights. So, I mean, the sharpening is better. That's what I think, anyway. And this is just one of the ways to make your picture look sharper. Like I said, since capture sharpening, I go pretty easy on this other sharpening. Now, the other thing you've got here is local contrast. And we'll turn this on, and at the default, I find the effect quite strong, but I turn it down, and sometimes I zoom in, so I can see, you know, you can see it can be strong. I don't play with the radius. I suppose you could play with the darkness level. Oh yeah. So, I mean, there is a lot of control over it, but I usually just, if I'm gonna use it, I use it pretty slight. But I've had a few pictures recently where I've found it looks good strong. Pictures that, you know, weren't very good to start with, generally speaking, right? But anyway, that's there. And then there's edges, and edges is, I'll turn this off before I turn edges on. Edges is, they say, it's like true sharpening. Like, Unsharp Mask is just kind of creating halos to make your picture look sharper. This supposedly is supposed to really sharpen it. And if you go to Rawpedia, to the edges and micro contrast section, they link to the paper that, you know, I suppose the person who made this tool wrote a paper about it. And here, you know, they say it's faster than Unsharp Mask, doesn't introduce halos or artifacts, works in the lab space, good for noisy images without amplifying noise. And I have turned it on a few times and played with it, but I generally don't use it. Wow, though, the picture looks really smooth and good with that on. Almost smoother, though. I don't know if that's what I want. Anyway, this is said to be true sharpening, not Unsharp Mask, right? And anyway, you can tell I don't use it on a regular basis, but it is there, and I appreciate it, because maybe for some reason you don't want to use Unsharp Mask on that picture. Maybe Unsharp Mask isn't cutting it. Maybe you have a picture that's already been Unsharp Masked and it's not sharp. Whatever the case, you have another sharpening tool here with edges, right? And you have another one with micro contrast. And I've mentioned this before, turning it on to mitigate the effects of noise reduction. And this picture we have here isn't very noisy, so it might not make a big difference here. But if you use heavy noise reduction, and particularly if you turn on the median filter in the noise reduction, you might want to enable micro contrast to bring back some of the detail, or to bring back the appearance of detail that was smeared by the median filter. I've mentioned that in a video before, and you know, you can watch my videos about sharpening and noise reduction. I don't want to get too into it here because I'm trying to go through this quickly and it's hard. Anyway, there's impulse noise reduction, which you can click on, and oh, I forgot to say, the micro contrast tool also is another thing that is kind of a less crucial now that the capture sharpening is in here. Might not be as needed, but I still do use it sometimes, especially in combination with this median filter if I'm doing heavy noise reduction. Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, impulse noise reduction is not for this picture, because impulse noise reduction is for salt and pepper noise. I've got another picture open here. Maybe this one has it. Let me see. No, I did not enable impulse noise reduction on this. This is a noisy picture from a little Pentax Q7. Let me see if I enable it. Now you see all these little bits here. Most of them are not even noise, but they go, right? Now, this is a bad example. Don't use it on this picture. But anyway, in a high ISO picture that's like very noisy and you can see that salt and pepper noise, click on this impulse noise reduction, and the threshold slider, you can adjust that to you know, strengthen or weaken the effect. And if, you know, in some cases like this one, it actually fills in little bits of detail. So I used to often turn it on without even thinking about it, but I don't anymore now. I only use it. Look at the little catch light in the bird's eye goes with impulse noise reduction. Let's see if we can threshold the bird's eye back. No, we can threshold back a lot of the detail that was lost, but not the little catch light in the bird's eye. So like, I do have good experience with this impulse noise reduction on really noisy pictures, but this one, even though it's kind of noisy, it's not noisy enough to make it useful. Here's the regular noise reduction. Now this picture isn't very noisy, but we're going to turn on noise reduction anyway, and let's find here an area with a bit of shadows. You can see there's like no noise. Okay. There's a little bit. There's a little bit here. We'll just turn it on, and by default, it's got the chrominance noise is enabled and is at an automatic setting that will be, you know, set on a per picture basis. And by default, there is no luminance noise reduction. And I've got a video about noise reduction in Raw Therapee. You can watch it, but in a nutshell, what I say to do in most cases is to drag luminance up to 100% and then drag detail recovery way up and back it off until you see the noise go. And usually you can get rid of all the noise in a picture without having a deleterious effect on the detail. And wow, it worked. See, the noise back here goes. Turn it off. You'll see a little bit of noise here. See the details in the slug, and we'll turn it on again, and you'll see the noise goes, and the details in the slug are almost unaffected. But one thing I am noticing is a slight effect to the color details in the slug. And this is something that was mentioned in the forums there. You go to the forums, the pixels.us is where, like, you know, a lot of the free software people have a forum. They talk about these programs like Raw Therapee and Darktable and whatnot, and it was kind of funny because someone mentioned this phenomenon where colors could be kind of adversely affected. Like, look at the colors here. And I turn on noise reduction, and at the auto settings, the chrominance noise reduction appears to be reducing the colorfulness. Now, I mean, that's probably all noise going, right? Technically, it's probably doing a good job. But anyway, I like this colorfulness too. So anyway, what you can do about this is you can play with the curve. This curve adjusts the strength of the chrominance noise reduction, or you could disable the automatic settings and play with the sliders, reduce the chrominance noise reduction, or reduce it just in one channel. But and that's what I said in the forums. You know, someone mentioned it and I was like, oh, this is what I do. But then people who know way more than me about this stuff came in and said, you know, what you really should do is if the picture is noisy, if you're really trying to like reduce noise, probably enable one of these other demosaicing methods, anything from DCB down through IGV. Play with them, pick one of them. DCB plus VNG4 is very nice. IGV is good for extremely high ISO. LMMSE is one that I've used, but for this picture, this is a low ISO and pretty sharp and detailed. I don't think the demosaicing is the problem here, but that's one of the things they said to do. And the other thing is, and this really does work, we'll see if it works on this picture now, or I'll make a liar out of myself, but change the color space of the noise reduction to RGB. Ooh, and see, now not a lot of the color came back, but the detail did. Yeah, that's definitely better. Let's see if we now change the demosaicing down to DCB. Now that doesn't have as much of a visible effect, but I think we're definitely doing better in the RGB color space with the noise reduction. Now this is only relevant if your picture has these kind of very fine color details. Not that these are that fine, but you know, they're small, right? Small little bits of colorfulness like moss and things like that. But anyway, that's something you can do to mitigate that, in addition to being able to play with the curve for chrominance noise reduction and the master and the channels, you know. So that's noise reduction, and I've covered this in other videos. You can enable the medium filter. I probably wouldn't for this picture, but you know, if you want more on noise reduction, watch my other videos. And then there's Defringe, and that's why I've got this picture open. See the fringe there? I mean, I had to look for a picture with a fringe, and when I don't want one, there's always one there. But anyway, you can see a bit of purple fringing there. And purple's good because, just watch, I'll turn on Defringe. Boom, it's gone. And you can look at the equalizer and you can see by default it has purple turned way up. We can actually probably turn that down until the fringing starts to come back a bit. You don't have to. You can leave it at the default. But if you had like green fringing or this, you know, sometimes there's blue, and the worse your camera and lens is, the more different kinds of fringing will be available to you under, you know, as you shoot under different conditions, right? And also, you know, the more you point your camera at fringy situations, right? But this really can do a great job. And the only thing to watch out for is, like, you know, if there's red fringing on something red or something like that. Of course, like, as you turn up, or say if we had purple in this picture and we turn this purple all the way up, eventually it might start to affect the edges of things that are really that color. So you just watch out for it. Usually with this color, there's nothing usually in your picture of that color. And so anyway, that's the Defringe tool. And I've showed a lot of this stuff in other videos, you know, so I don't want to get too deep into it today. And next time I feel like the color tab is a bit more exciting. I think this sharpening is one of the big selling points of Raw Therapee. But I just find it hard to get excited about sharpening. But it is, like, you know, one of the things that makes it good. Anyway. Okay, so Defringe, and then finally we've got contrast by detail levels and haze removal. So contrast by detail levels, there's something similar over in the advanced tab under wavelets, and basically you can adjust the contrast of different levels of detail according to how big or small those details are. So when we're zoomed into 100% here, adjusting the finest level of detail makes a big difference, you know, and it looks good as long as we don't turn it up way too high, right? And you can also just click contrast up, contrast down, and it will adjust the finest levels up more than the coarsest, one step at a time, right? And the effect can be pretty strong, and depending on the picture, it can look good or whoa, or it can look way overdone, right? And it's pretty powerful stuff. But now you have to reset them all one by one. Okay, we're reset. Yeah. Okay, so the thing about this is you can adjust the different levels. Like here we can adjust the finest level, and we can adjust the levels as we like, but you may be wasting your time adjusting the finest levels depending on what your, you know, final output is, what you intend to do with the picture, right? Like if I was going to post this on Instagram or something like that, it's going to be, you know, low resolution, and there would be no point in me zooming into 100% and adjusting these finest levels, because that's not going to be in the final picture. But what I might do, if I was so inclined, is to zoom out a bit more and adjust some of the coarser levels and see how that looks. And that is something that, you know, would show up in your lower resolution, right? So in general terms, you can use this to adjust the different levels of detail to your own taste. But do keep in mind that depending on the way the picture is used and the size it's used at, and, you know, the viewing distance and everything else, it may not, you know, show up to your eye, you know. So keep that in mind, you know. If you're planning to print a picture at a certain size, you're planning to put it on Instagram, or you're planning to view it on your, you know, your big computer screen at full screen, they're all going to want different approaches to this tool, right? And anyway, there it is. It's pretty cool. I find even sometimes just using the default and just clicking it up by 1 or 2 clicks looks pretty good. But of course, if you're, you know, working on a picture for a specific purpose, you'll want to adjust this according to that purpose. It's also able to protect skin tones. I don't know about that. You have to look it up if you want to get deeper into this, right? Just trying to get you started. And then there's haze removal, and I don't have a hazy picture. this is similar to your dehaze in Adobe Lightroom if you're used to using Adobe Lightroom. And if we turn it on this picture, it's going to look pretty bad. But if you had a picture that's full of a fog or something, and for some reason you didn't want the fog in there, I find it hard to imagine the situation where you've taken a picture with haze in it and you want the haze gone. But I don't know, maybe it's haze from your lens or something, or haze. I suppose you could have haze from, you know, light shining into your lens or something. Anyway, this can get rid of haze. And you can look at a depth map so you can see, and then adjust the depth. That will kind of adjust the details that get dehazed, apparently. I don't know, I don't use it. And you can adjust the strength of the dehaze. And in the few cases that I have used this, where a picture is like, does have a bit of low contrast, maybe haze from a bright light shining into the lens or whatever the case, I would drag the strength down so it doesn't look all overdone, right? But it's rare that I use it. Oh, and you can apply it to luminance only. Let's see what happens there. Oh, that looks better because it doesn't affect the colors. So if you were using it to remove haze and you didn't want, sometimes it removes the haze, it makes the picture too colorful. So there you go, turn on luminance only and you can have it not make your colors all wild. Anyway, that's the details tab, and like, I don't want to get too into it, like I said, because well, for one thing, because I've made videos about the noise reduction and sharpening before, and for the other thing, same disclaimer that was on my last video, I am not a developer of this. I don't know what's going on under the hood. I'm not involved with it in any way except that I'm a user of it, and I just want to show it off, basically promote it a bit if I can, evangelize it. I think it's an awesome raw converter. I think it's better than Adobe Lightroom. It's better than any I've tried, and there's only one of the big ones I haven't tried. I'm not going to say its name here now, but there's one I haven't tried of the big ones, you know, and I'm not going to bother. I think this one is awesome, and you should try it. And my next video, I will show you the colors tab. And oh yeah, 5.8 is out, and it has capture sharpening. Raw Therapee is better than ever. Go download it, install it, use it. Compare the pictures. You know, play with the sharpening and noise reduction on some of your pictures, and then compare the output. Don't just compare it in the software. Like, output the pictures and compare the output to you know, whatever else you're using. You might be surprised. I was. Anyway, peace.